This conference will now be recorded.
Hello, everyone. My name's Bryan Del Monte, and today I want to give you a quick talk about coronavirus and how aviation can survive coronavirus. Real briefly, who am I, right? Why should you listen to me? Well, I run an agency in Minneapolis called the Aviation Agency. I've got over 25 years in communications. I've been a presidential speech writer. I'm an ad executive. I also have done a lot of government policy. I've addressed Congress and Parliament and the UN and other places like that. I've also been with business consulting firms, Booz Allen. I've also done a fair amount of business consulting. I'm an economist, statistician, policy wonk, so I'm not your normal, typical run-of-the-mill ad guy. And we love this industry. And if you're interested, I could tell you my full story about how I wound up doing this vertical. But we love aviation, and we know this is a tough time for aviation. We know people are scared. We know that people are wondering, what do I do? And today's presentation is actually sponsored by one of our clients, AircraftDealer.com. And they asked me to put this briefing together for you, their clients, after I gave them a similar briefing when they were my clients in this briefing, to explain to you the nature of the situation and what to do, right? Because I think there's a lot of bad news, but more importantly, there's a lot of drama, and it's important to ignore the drama. So I want to give you what I think is fact and what I think you should focus on at the moment. So let's talk about the situation. What is the situation right now? Well, it's pretty intense, to say the least. One of my other clients, Radarbox, tracks all flights through ADS-B data, and we've been putting together a series of charts for the news outlets. Long story short, commercial airline traffic has effectively collapsed. At its peak, there were 97,000 flights a day for the United States. Today, that's about 31,000 flights. Granted, that's commercial traffic only. But you see a 2/3 fall in the number of planes flying. Most of the planes flying right now, one of the things that this graph doesn't show, one of the things happening right now is the planes are empty. Lots of the planes that aren't being used are being parked in the boneyards. The boneyards in Arizona and California are filling up. There's just no other way to explain it. The airlines themselves are experiencing negative net bookings that make 9/11 look like a day at the beach. They've never experienced the level of stress that they are under right now. And that is just the reality of their situation. I want to show you this graph that we put together early on. I think we made this graph on the 11th of March, 11th or 12th of March. And might be the 13th, might have been that Friday. But this was based on data that we had gotten from OAG. And as you can see, I mean, essentially on that Wednesday, I know it seems like a million years ago, but on that, March 11th, March 12th, when the president announced, the travel restrictions, scheduled capacity started falling like a rock. Now, it's taking a toll on the airlines. Flybe, Compass, they're gone. ASA, SAS, British, Virgin, they're on the bubble. The carriers in the United States, even with the bailout, which I'll get to in a minute, they're also in desperate trouble. in particular American and United. But all of the major carriers are all in trouble. There's no other way to say it. Now, of course, then there's the bailout, right? Well, the bailout will solve things. Well, maybe, maybe not. Okay. They're already complaining, even though they've gotten the 58 billion. All of them have stopped offering guidance on earnings. They're all threatening to lay off workers as soon as they get out from underneath the bailout. Some are suggesting they're going to have to go through bankruptcy even with the bailouts. And they're all suggesting permanent capacity restrictions and reductions. So the bailout means that commercial aviation isn't going to like furlough everyone immediately, but they are going to fire staff. They are going to reduce capacity. They are going to break their debt covenants. They are going to try to break the backs of their unions. And they're going to struggle into 2021 and beyond. There's no other way to look at it. Now, for those of you that might be listening that have MRO, FBO business, clearly you're in pain too right now. This top bullet point really struck me. Oliver Wyman typically gives earnings guidance with respect to MROs. Prior to all this, they were estimating about 91 billion in revenue. Now they're expecting 42 billion. That's just brutal. Plus, the airlines are all in cash preservation mode, especially with negative net bookings. So, as you'll see in the other slide here, ATS, which is one of the largest independent MROs, and I produced this a week ago. So now, instead of seeing a two-week backlog, basically after next week, they feel they're done. Rolls-Royce has suspended engine production. Boeing has suspended production. 2 days ago, they announced they're laying off roughly 50% of the aerospace workforce. Safran withdrew its dividend, and they set up a $2 billion euro borrowing facility to try to borrow their way through the crisis. That's interesting, actually. They're the only company that I've read that is going to finance itself through the crisis and bet on itself. Now, so, like, we've all seen these headlines, right? We all know the news. Despite what you may be feeling right now, the world is not ending. Okay? Things are messed up. There's no other way to look at it. And those of you that are aircraft dealers clients right now, your brokers, your world is stopped too, right? There's not a lot of buying and selling. The 135 business has effectively come to a halt. Part 91 business has effectively come to a halt. There's a lot of nothing going on. Then, so you may be feeling this is it. Well, no, the world is not ending. Here's the reality of what we know. The virus is not spreading unabated. We can talk about, 30 days to reduce the spread, 15 days to reduce the spread. Yeah, I saw the same videos you saw of revelers down in Florida, and, I get it. But the virus is not spreading without restriction. It just isn't. Okay. All of the modeling, and I've looked at all of it. You ever wondered in your life, when's math going to save our lives? Well, this may be the moment. Okay. I have had to rebrush up on more calculus and statistics than I probably did even when I was in college. All the modeling suggests nationally, this will have peaked by May. For some states on the East and West Coast, it may be peaking by the third week of April, maybe by the second week of April. And we know that essentially the rate at which it will spread and our ability to contain it will more or less be brought under control by June. Okay? So it's not spreading unabated. And we have a firm idea what's going on with the epidemiology across the United States. We know it's not going to decimate our society. This is not zombie virus. We're not going to have 28 days later and everything implodes. That's not to diminish the death toll. The death toll very well could be the singularly most deadly event for the United States outside of the Civil War. About 800,000 people were killed in the Civil War. No one, thankfully, is predicting any numbers that high with coronavirus, but the numbers are just unfathomably high that we may have 100 to 200,000 people die within 2-3 months since this has started. Even coronary heart disease, which is the #1 killer in the United States, doesn't kill that quickly. So this is very serious, but it's not going to decimate our society. We know there's another side of this. We know we're going to eventually get to that other side. Maybe it's July, maybe it's August, maybe it's September, maybe it's October. As business leaders, we need to prepare for that. Because there's a whole lot of nothing going on right now, and it's tough to sell, and it's tough to engage in commerce, you need to prepare for when the restrictions release. This is an opportunity for you to focus on your business without the relenting must sell, must sell, must sell. Okay. So we know that there's going to be another day, and we know we have to prepare for it. So there is opportunity and there is chaos. There's no other way to say it. It's just off the hook. But there are things I want you to appreciate. Those things are essentially this. There are always winners and losers in the economy. You have to decide which one you're going to be. And yes, it will be hard. And yes, there will be setbacks. And yes, you will have to marshal all of your skills. This is probably the singular greatest challenge for the industrialized world since the Second World War. But there are always winners and losers in the economy. And I've listed a bunch here. Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, IBM, Disney. They all started in horrendously bad times. The economy is set up with billions of transactions. I'll tell you for a fact. Okay, I have another client, charter broker, made a sale this week. $30,000+ charter. Okay. There are billions of transactions going on out there. There are going to be winners and losers, and you have to decide which one you're going to be. If you intend to be a winner, you have to have a perseverance and resilience mindset. And aviation is going to lead the way on this. It's going to have to. And you may be thinking, well, why? We're the ones taking it so hard. Yeah, we are. Because, just a quick problem here with my slides. I don't expect the airlines are going to come back from this in less than a decade. Okay. I know there are all these, as an economist, I will tell you this. There is no economic model that I've ever studied that comes even remotely close to the situation we are in right now. Just doesn't happen. I never saw an economic model that said take an economy, vaporize half its wealth in a week, shut down its economic operations, but for about 25% for 2 months, try to backfill everyone's income with government welfare, and then try to restart that economy. So any economists that are out there saying it's going to be a V, it's going to be a U, I don't know. I'm an economist. I don't have a good model to base this on. Now, there's a lot of reasons to believe that when this is over, there is going to be a surge. There is going to be a land grab. there is going to be opportunity. There's opportunity right now. While this is severe, it's not fundamentally different than a natural disaster. And we know, and we have some economic models that think about natural disasters. Granted, we don't have them on this scale. But for you guys that are in the business aviation, that are brokers, charter guys, these guys, you're actually going to be in pretty good shape when this is over, we think, because we don't expect the airlines to come back right away. It could take them a decade. They're shelving planes and making decisions that are going to go way beyond 2021. For them, this is going to be like 9/11. There was only one carrier that did well post 9/11, Southwest Airlines. It had a resilience mindset, and it went out and it bought and consolidated and pushed ahead. Overall, the industry took 5 years to recover. It didn't get back to pre-9/11 flights levels until 2006. I personally don't expect disposable incomes are going to be as high as they were. And so I don't think travel and leisure is going to be that active overall. I also think that it's going to be tough to get the public to just jump on a plane again. And I'm talking about commercial carriers. Okay. And I also think, and you want to talk about a bright spot in all this, the guys that do, the sleepy niche in aviation of disinfection and, germ control, those guys are now the star of the show. Normally you'd go to MRO Americas or whatever, right? And you'd see them and it'd be like, oh, we do that. Yeah. Now it's like, hey, bro, we need to totally talk about disinfecting aircraft. So there are going to be questions about safety and public health. Here's why aviation is going to be first. And here's why there's going to be bright spots for you that are brokers. The first is people have to get places. Business has to be done. Commerce has to move. If capacity falls the way we think it will, there aren't going to be 30 flights a day to wherever and a first class ticket available. So what does that mean? Well, post-corona, the bright spots in this niche are going to be business aviation, because I'll explain in a minute, we think a lot of people are going to stop opting to just pay first class on airline X and are going to actually look at either long-term charter leasing, jet card, things like that. In other words, they're going to get into the business aviation market. Secondary market, we think, is going to be active, in part because a lot of these aircraft manufacturers either shut down or they're making stuff under the Defense Production Act. So just like in World War II, the 1946 Cadillac may look a lot like the 1942 Cadillac. So there may not be a lot of new planes available, number one. And number two, the secondary market's going to be more attractive because, again, people are going to shift away from commercial. The OEMs for mid and heavy turbine, I would imagine, do pretty well. I would expect Gulfstream, whoever winds up owning Bombardier, whoever winds up owning Embraer, that those planes are going to do pretty well over the next 10 years. All the people who support those markets are going to do well, and that's you. And like I said, disinfection, cleaning, and certification of health risks are going to be, a bright spot in all this. You wouldn't think about it that way, but I think that's true. One of my other clients, very smart guy, David Clark of Integris, I asked him his thoughts, and what I want to share is what he wrote me, because we were talking about the capacity reductions and everything else. And he said to me this: what does it mean for the travel industry? A lot. For the airlines, it's a catastrophic set of events because by definition, they depend on hauling masses of people in volume. The very thing that's not possible with this virus. And going forward, public health questions, I think, are going to be a question. And so he says, and he agrees. And so he says, fundamentally, I believe consumer habits are going to change for a good while. That will make mass transit unappealing and too risky for the public to stomach. Travel expenses are also discretionary dollars that will be needed elsewhere for the long recovery ahead. The shrinking of available seats, destination, and frequency by the airlines will be nothing short of stunning and will make travel for business a very difficult proposition. From a time value standpoint, it will make less and less sense to take the airlines. Businesses will not be able to afford to have people take airlines for work purposes. It will cost too much in time and thus lost opportunities because of the drastically reduced travel options. Okay, so there is opportunity here. Commercial isn't going to bounce back right away. There's going to need to be innovation in aviation, and particularly with respect to business aviation. So, what are we recommending then you do? And that was essentially when I explained all this to AircraftDealer, they were like, well, that's great, but the world's super scary at the moment. So, how do we survive to get to the rainbow? It's a very good question. So, I'm going to give you my advice. It's the advice I'm also following myself. One, you got to get all the lifelines you can from the government. In all the years, and I am not someone who believes in welfare. In terms of, the times I've been out of work, I haven't filed for unemployment in my life. I've bootstrapped my own businesses. I have, taken out loans, only private sector loans. I get it. And I know many of you in this industry are exactly the same way. It's in part why I like working in this industry. This is a uniquely unusual situation. Okay. Essentially, because of a public health concern that is unavoidable, we have shut down the economy in order to preserve public health. There's nothing any of us could have done to foreseen that black swan. It's just not possible. The government is offering essentially free money to run your business for the next 3 months, 2.5 months, actually. There are a series of programs. Some of them you may have heard of. You can go to sba.gov and take a look at them. Essentially, there is economic disaster loans. There are paycheck loans they call it the Paycheck Protection Program. It's a program that actually allows you to borrow the equivalent of payroll and overhead for 2.5 months. And if you actually use it for payroll and overhead, you may never have to pay it back. There are grants from the federal government. All the years that I've ever done federal government programs, the only time I've ever seen having to put in my banking information is for when I have to pay the government something, not when I'm going to get something. If you go to SBA and you fill out the economic disaster loans, you actually can put in your checking account information so that you may receive grant money. And that's going to be starting to disperse now here very shortly. I was in a briefing this morning with the Small Business Administration. I asked explicitly about this because I was one of the first to file for a grant as soon as it became available. And they said that money should be starting to disperse by next week. And as I record this, it's April 3rd, if you were wondering. Get those lifelines from the government. It's not your fault that the circumstance is the way it is. You have to preserve your people and you have to preserve your capital. Secondly, get hustling like you've never hustled before. Okay. In this business, we have 3 big buckets of how we make revenue: trade shows, print, and straight up salesmanship. Honestly, I don't see any trade shows happening until 2021. I hope I'm wrong about that, but even right now, as I give this speech, I'll be super surprised if MBAA happens, which is the biggest show that I can think of coming up. That hasn't canceled. MRO America's canceled, eBay's canceled. Lots of other shows I was going to attend canceled. Oddly enough, when this all hit the head, I was at the Schedulers and Dispatchers Conference. There are going to be no conferences. I saw that conference fall apart right before my eyes. So no conferences. All the print goes to companies' offices and nobody's there right now. So print's ineffective. So it's straight up salesmanship. You got to get out there hustling. Outflows, outflows, outflows is what is going to matter. Not what are people going to be bringing in, but what you're saying, what you're doing. You have to talk to all of your customers. Let them just vent, if nothing else, and let them tell you how freaked out they are. Try not to freak each other out. Try to be calm in all this. What you do right now is what you're going to be remembered for when we come out of this thing. So if you were running around like Chicken Little, that's what people are going to remember. Be calm, be helpful, be constructive. Contact everyone in your network. Be on the phone, talk to people, produce content, produce things that are useful. Third, pivot to what's needed using your expertise. Now, I've seen some really extreme examples of this. Let me give you a real life example of this. So before I did aviation, we did consumer product goods. I have a friend who's an inventor, and he was inventing, for lack of a better description, it's a fancy toothbrush. And he was having it made in China. Okay. In the long term, we'll see how that all shapes out, but he was having it made in China. And his expertise really is logistics. He's really good at moving things. He's really good at moving things for less. And that's his expertise. And so when this hit the fan, he stopped with the toothbrushes with the manufacturer. And the manufacturer, among other things, guess what they made? Masks, N95 masks in particular. So now this guy is one of the largest importers of N95 masks during this crisis from China. He just sold like 1 million masks last week, he said. You know? So you got to pivot to where your expertise is needed. You got to look for those opportunities. It may not be what you were doing 3 weeks ago. For now, you got to focus on survival, the hustling, the lifelines, the pivot. You got to survive to September. But don't lose the bubble long term, which is to pivot and grow out of this. Because out of the ashes, there will be a land grab to dominate what's left. And so what I'm suggesting to you is that you have to press on. You have to get your brand out there. You have to get your name out there. You have to connect with people individually. You have to do all of this. Outflows. That's all that's going to matter and sustain you. So why press on? Right? I actually got that question. I have a few clients. I'll just be frank. They panicked and ran. They buttoned up. They laid off their staff. Even when I was saying to them at the time, I'm like, whoa, hold on. Yeah, things are really awful. And yeah, everything may come to a stop. But I understood very early on that the government was going to have to do something because they were the ones shutting down the economy. And I was like, look, if you throw all these people to the wind, then what? I'm like, default on your debt obligations, default on your debt covenants or whatnot, but keep your people. You got to keep pressing on. You got to have all hands on deck. You got to stand at your post. And some chose to, and some chose not to. Like I said, everyone's going to have to make their decision. There's going to be winners and losers, and you got to decide which one you're going to be. And if you're going to be a winner, then you have to be prepared to fight because it's going to be hard. So it's getting your name out. It's talking to customers. It's talking to prospects. And of course, you might actually find you enjoy this because there's nothing to be sold right now, right? The economy's effective. I mean, unless you're making handy wipes or you're working for Amazon or you've got nitrile gloves or something, you're not really engaged much in commerce at the moment. And I do marketing for a living. And so, what are we focused on with our clients? Continuing to market them and continuing to keep their brand up. Let me give you this quick thing to think about. Okay. A lot of clients that I deal with, they all subscribe to a myth. And the myth is if I just had tons and tons of money, all my marketing would be simple. All my branding would be simple. I would just get so many leads and so many sales. And well, I've handled and worked with some of the biggest accounts there are. Okay. The problems don't change, just the dollars get bigger. I will tell you from talking with other agencies, other agency leaders, various accounts, they're all struggling right now as well, trying to figure out what to do. But I will tell you this much, all the big companies, none of them are actually walking away from spending money. They are frustrated beyond belief right now because the tools and techniques they normally use are completely worthless in this time. For example, big packaged good companies, they would normally, or like take liquor or beer, they would normally advertise against sports. There's no live sports going on. So how can they get their name out? Okay. So having more money doesn't make life easier necessarily. I mean, although I am a adherent to, money may not buy happiness, but poverty buys nothing. Okay, I'm I'm completely on board with that philosophy. But understand that the big boys, the people who have decided to survive, even with all their money, it's still not easy for them, but they've made a commitment to keep pressing on. That's what you have to do as well. And I want to explain why. You may think, well, branding, what's my ROI, all this other stuff. You got to be talking to everybody right now. You got to be pushing your brand right now. You got to be out there right now because, A, in good times, not being seen is your number one enemy. Okay, obscurity is most of aviation businesses' number one enemy, including you brokers and dealers out there, because I've met a lot of you, and your network is all referral, and you're not widely known. But some of what I'm going to tell you is going to make perfect sense to you. Okay, right now, I will tell you this. Your brand is the only thing keeping your biggest client. Gallup has done several polls to understand the role of branding and brand sentiment. Right? Gallup is a polling organization. And I guess 3 years ago now, Gallup found that 72% of business to business customers actively consider taking their business to another provider. And I'll bet you right now, man, that number's like 99%, given the fact everyone's freaking out and it's hitting the fan. So their connection to you may be the only thing keeping your biggest client. I know right now that that was the case for our agency. We contacted every client, talked to them, talked them off the ledge. We did a strategy session internally to figure out what we could offer them. Forget what they had contracted. What can we do right now that helps them? Those are the meetings that we had, all for the reason of ensuring that they didn't just freak out and leave. You got to do the same thing. Your brand is the only thing that probably builds trust with them. Okay, 48% of the customers in that Gallup poll believe that their vendors actually deliver on the promises they make. So when things are bad like they are now, you can actually bond yourself with clients by actually delivering on the things that you promised you would do. And your brand may be the only thing that actually makes you more money. 51% of customers actively feel good about the various brands that they deal with. This is the B2B customers versus 83% for the business to consumer customers. Now, here's the funny thing, okay? In business to consumer, okay, when you sell a consumer product, brand typically is all that matters because most consumer products are essentially non-unique. There are tons of cars out there. There are tons of sofas out there. There are tons of sodas out there. There are tons of toilet paper, if you can buy it, out there. There are tons of handy wipes out there, if you can buy it, right? Very little in the consumer space isn't copied over and over and over. So brand's all that matters, by and large. So it's no shock to me that 83% of business to consumer relationships, that the purchase is heavily influenced by the brand. Well, the reality is there is no B2C and there's no B2B. People deal with people. It's all P2P. And them having a good feeling about you, them feeling that they can trust you, them feeling that they like you is how you make more money. Now, we talk then about, well, what's the ROI of all this? Right? Why should I do all this? I hear that all the time. Drives me crazy. For those of you that are on this call, especially those of you that are brokers and dealers, in the end, I've talked with many of you. You're all pretty solid salesmen. So bear with me for a moment and take it as a review, because I know you all know it, whether you know it instinctively or whether or not you've been formally trained in it. In order to make a sale, there are essentially three variables that have to be resolved, hopefully in favor of the company, to decide whether or not a sale can even take place. Sometimes they're referred to as the 3 10s, because we talk about a slider from 0 to 10, where 0 is they absolutely know for certain you're not it, or that it's not it, or that the company's not it, and 10 is they absolutely know for certain you are it, the company is it, the product is it. Now, if everything's at 10, it doesn't mean that there will be a sale, but you can't get to the conditions of a sale without these three things being very positively in your favor. The first one is, do I like, respect, and trust the person talking to me? In a time like this, you get an opportunity to have a whole lot of conversations and do a whole lot of talking. You should take that opportunity. It builds trust. It builds respect. You're going to find out things you wouldn't have otherwise found out. Do I like, respect, and trust the company? This is the second thing. Now, for many of you, you got to understand when they do sales training, it's generalized. For many of you, you and your company are essentially alter egos, so these two variables collapse into one variable. But for those of you that work for bigger companies, your company's reputation matters. You all know this. You don't want to work for companies that suck. You don't want to work for companies that don't have good reputations. Now, in the middle of all this, it's funny. In the middle of all this, we had a meeting with an aerospace parts manufacturing company. And they were like, well, we don't understand our brand. We don't know what to say, et cetera, et cetera. And I said, okay, well, what do you think your number one reason is why you think your clients buy from you? Well, because they trust us and they know we follow through on our commitments and all these other things. And I'm thinking, okay, well, because they maximize these variables for the people who believe it. And so then I asked this woman, because she had just been a new hire reasonably. I think she'd been on the job like 5 months. I said, well, why did you join this company? Well, unremarkably so. It's a lot of the same reasons about trust and authority and conviction and following through. Okay, it all has to do with the nature of the relationship with the company and with the individual. So this is an opportunity right now for you to improve those things because there's a whole lot of nothing going on. So you might as well reach out, be genuine, be empathetic. And the final one is, do I think the solution is likely to solve my real problems? This is where pivoting is going to be helpful. If there's something that you can do for one of your clients or prospects, even though it's not something you would normally do, you might want to do it during this period of time. One, because A, you might get paid for it. Two, it actually builds and cements relationships. Okay. And so these are the 3 10s, and you can take this opportunity. I mean, we have realistically at least another 2, if not 3 weeks of cooling our jets. What are you going to use this time for? Whining or outreach? The companies that don't let off the gas, again, I'll come back to this. There's a whole lot of nothing going on. So for you brokers and dealers, if you understand that most of your competitors are going to do nothing, I know many of you are going to listen to this call and a lot of you aren't going to do anything. You're going to have a whole bunch of reasons why you say that. I'm not here to argue with you. But there will be people who don't. And those people who don't, those are the people who are going to be positioned to win at the end of this, because they're the ones that are going to move these variables over to the left, or over to the right, sorry. Okay, they're the ones that are going to build certainty. That's what this time's about. So again, what are you going to do? You're going to be helpful. You're going to build relationships. You're going to build confidence in others. Everyone is running around right now. The market, the this, the that. Did you see what Trump did? Did you hear what Pelosi said? Did you, people are dropping dead in blank, Yeah. One of the things you got to do right now is just build confidence in others and calm them down. I'm doing this with my client because I believe this myself. Second, you got to make content. Videos, blog posts, share things you find interesting. Everyone's at home. Let them hear from you. Look to provide value where you can. Not that everyone can suddenly be a mask importer, although if they could, that would be great. Sounds like we got a real fight on our hands in terms of getting enough masks. But look to provide value where you can. It may not be what you were normally thinking. Finally, I would say this to you. When you do get a potential order, be sensitive on payment terms, because right now everyone is cash strapped. Okay. And we've had to do this too. We've had to work with clients and we've had to change terms. And, we've actually picked up some new clients in the middle of this. And all of them are a percentage now and a percentage at the end of the rainbow. Not that we're working on commission or contingent. We're not. We don't do that as an agency. And I know many of you don't do that. And some of you do it in terms of commissions. But if you bet on you and you bet on your clients and you bet on you working together and doing well, it will serve you at the end of the rainbow. So you got to be sensitive to that. In short, it's real simple. The strategy of perseverance and resilience boils down to this: build brand, build trust, build business. We have faced as an industry broader challenges than this before. We will survive if we keep our heads, we keep our cool, we focus on building our brands, we build trust and confidence in one another, and we build business. Together, we can do it. I want to thank you for listening. I hope you found this informative. Reach out to Aircraft Dealer with questions. I'm sure they're ready to help as well. If you'd like to contact me, Again, my name is Bryan Del Monte. I'm at the Aviation Agency. Here's my contact information. Or reach out to Larry and Jeff. They also are ready to help you, and they want to help you. So again, thank you to Aircraft Dealer. Thank you to listening to me, and I hope you guys have a great day.